The story opens not in a pristine, acoustically treated recording studio in Los Angeles or London, but in the dusty, smudged window of a Chicago pawn shop in the mid-1980s. Sitting there on a sagging glass shelf, wedged somewhere between a broken toaster with a frayed cord and a set of rusted golf clubs, is a clunky plastic box. It has a row of brightly colored buttons, red, orange, yellow, and white, that make it look less like a serious musical instrument and more like an oversized calculator or a child's toy left out in the rain. This is a drum machine, first released in 1980. And by every traditional metric of the music industry at the time, it was a spectacular, embarrassing commercial failure. Professional musicians, the studio elite who dictated what the world listened to, had dismissed it entirely. They plugged it in, hit a button, listened to the sound it produced, and decided it sounded like a robot having a panic attack. It didn't sound like a real drum kit. It didn't sound like anything real at all. But this specific piece of discarded engineering, sitting in a pawn shop with a $50 price tag slapped on its plastic casing, is the sonic equivalent of a winning lottery ticket forgotten in the pocket of a winter coat. We are opening a singular, massive dossier on a technological anomaly. And the glitch we are investigating today is not the kind you find buried deep inside lines of software code or a malfunctioning microchip. It is the kind of glitch that lives inside the system itself. We are looking at the exact moment an entire industry casually throws away the future, simply because they cannot yet recognize what the future is supposed to sound like. To understand how a piece of plastic became a holy grail, we have to rewind to the year 1980. This was an era absolutely obsessed with the pursuit of sterile, perfect digital audio. The 1970s had been defined by tape hiss, analog warmth, and physical instruments. But as the 80s dawned, the recording industry wanted clean lines. They wanted absolute, mathematical perfection. In Japan, a team of brilliant engineers at a company called Roland was desperately trying to figure out how to accurately replicate the complex sound of real acoustic instruments. They wanted to build a machine that could sit in a studio and replace a human drummer. But they faced a massive, seemingly impossible economic constraint. At the time, computer memory RAM was astronomically expensive. If you wanted to record the actual sound of a real snare drum and store it on a microchip to be played back later, you needed memory. And memory cost money, a lot of money. To keep the price of their new machine somewhat reasonable for consumers, the engineers at Roland made a fateful decision. They abandoned digital sampling entirely. Instead, they decided to build a purely analog synthesizer. They would attempt to generate every single sound, every kick, every snare, every cymbal not from recorded audio, but from raw, fluctuating electrical signals. They were trying to paint a photorealistic portrait using only finger paints. The result was the Roland TR-808 rhythm composer, and it sounded aggressively, unapologetically unnatural. When you hit the button for the kick drum, it didn't sound like a felt beater hitting a taut animal skin. It sounded like a massive synthetic heartbeat echoing inside a tin can. The snare drum didn't have the sharp, woody crack of real percussion. It sounded like a sudden, synthesized burst of white noise, like a television suddenly losing its signal. And the cowbell. Well, the 808 cowbell became famously bizarre. A weird, metallic clank that sounded like someone hitting a piece of aluminum piping with a wrench. The initial backlash from the musical establishment was brutal. The elite hated it. And their hatred was entirely justified by the market, because right around the same time, a competitor arrived that gave the industry exactly what it wanted. The Linn LM1 was a massive, incredibly expensive drum machine that used actual high-quality digital recordings of real studio drummers. It was the sound of reality, digitized. Prince used it. Michael Jackson used it. The Linn LM1 was a photograph, and the industry loved photographs. Faced with this competition, the 808 looked like a joke. It was a machine designed to mimic reality that had failed spectacularly at its only job. After a mere 3 years of sluggish sales and critical mockery, Roland quietly discontinued the TR-808 inches 1,983. The remaining inventory was shipped off to discount retailers, dumped into bargain bins, and eventually found its way into the secondhand market. Pawn shops, thrift stores, garage sales. This is our core conflict. It is a classic, almost painfully predictable case of the establishment discarding what they cannot understand. The glitch, you see, was not in the machine. The glitch was in the industry's ability to hear the future. Because while the million-dollar studios in Los Angeles were busy playing with their expensive digital toys, a completely different reality was unfolding in the bankrupt, post-industrial landscapes of Detroit and Chicago. Imagine the scene. It's the mid-1980s. The manufacturing jobs have left. The cities are hollowed out. And in these sprawling concrete environments, you have a generation of broke teenagers with absolutely no formal musical training, but with an intense desire to create. They can't afford a Lin LM1. They can't afford studio time, but they can afford a $50 brightly colored plastic box sitting in the window of a local pawn shop. This movement was not just a shift in musical genres. It was the formation of a sonic secret society. These kids dragged the 808 cess back to their bedrooms and damp basements. And crucially, they did not read the manual. They didn't care that the machine was supposed to sound like a traditional rock drummer. They actively abused the hardware. They plugged these cheap analog machines into overloaded guitar pedals and blown-out speakers. They pushed the primitive sequencers past their intended mathematical limits. They discovered something astonishing. When you took this failed machine and forced it to process too much information, when you cranked the tempo and overdriven the bass out of the kick drum, it stopped trying to be a polite, traditional instrument. It transformed. It became a weapon of pure, aggressive texture. The low-end kick drum of the 808 didn't just play a note. It moved the air in the room. It rattled your ribcage. It had a physical weight to it that digital audio simply could not replicate. The glitch in the matrix had finally found its operators. These were people the economic system had largely discarded, making revolutionary music on machines the musical system had also thrown away. In Chicago, they used the 808's hypnotic driving sequences to invent house music. In Detroit, they leaned into its cold, alien, robotic nature to birth techno. And in the Bronx, pioneers used its massive, earth-shaking bass to lay the foundation for modern hip-hop. But let's slow down for a moment. Let's step away from the urban legends and the romanticized history of underground clubs and take a deep forensic dive into the actual circuitry of the machine itself. Why did this specific piece of plastic groove in a way that felt almost dangerously human? Why did an analog synthesizer, built by engineers trying to save a few dollars on memory chips, possess a feel that modern supercomputers still struggle to emulate? The answer is a documented story of engineering sabotage hiding in plain sight. When Roland's founder, Ikutaro Kakehashi, was sourcing components for the 808, he needed a specific type of transistor to generate the white noise that formed the basis of the snare and the hi-hat sounds. But standard, high-quality transistors sounded too clean. They lacked character. So, Kakehashi deliberately sought out a batch of two SC828R transistors that were, by all manufacturing standards, defective. These were components that the manufacturer had rejected because they didn't meet quality control specifications. They leaked current. They behaved unpredictably. They were, for all intents and purposes, broken. But Kakehashi realized that when you ran an electrical signal through these specific faulty transistors, they produced a unique, sizzling, organic warmth. They sputtered and hissed in a way that sounded remarkably like a real metal cymbal vibrating in the air. The legendary sound of the TR-808, the sound that would go on to define decades of popular music, was born entirely from this deliberate act of utilizing broken analog hardware. This is a masterclass in sonic alchemy. Think about the profound irony of it. A whole generation of listeners, dancers, and producers projected emotion, soul, and a physical swing onto what was, in reality, the sound of deliberately out-of-spec, unwanted silicon. The engineers had built a machine out of trash, and the underground had turned it into gold. In fact, the reliance on these defective components is exactly what killed the machine. A few years into production, the company that made the transistors upgraded their manufacturing process. They fixed the defect. They started producing clean, perfect components. And because Roland could no longer get their hands on the broken transistors, they literally could not manufacture the 808 to sound the same way anymore. The flaw was the magic. And once the flaw was cured, the magic died. The real glitch, therefore, was never inside the circuit board. It was inside the market itself. The industry threw away the 808 because it sounded wrong. And that specific, transistor leaking wrongness turned out to be the most culturally right sound of the next 20 years. As the 1980s bled into the 1990s, this raw, hypnotic, underground sound began to seep into the mainstream consciousness. And the institutional conflict that followed was entirely predictable. Major record labels, traditional studio executives, and radio programmers panicked. They heard this heavy, relentless, synthesized bass and the sizzling, unnatural hi-hats, and they didn't hear music. They heard a hostile takeover. They viewed the 808's dominance as the triumph of noise over melody, of machines over musicians. There were actual debates, both in the press and within the halls of major labels, about whether this new electronic sound was actively destroying the art of songwriting. But the anomaly could not be contained. The sound was too visceral. It made people move. It made people feel something that the sterile, perfectly digitized pop music of the era simply couldn't touch. Which brings us to the climax of our investigation. The ultimate proof of the Matrix correcting itself. Remember that pawn shop in Chicago? Remember the $50 price tag sitting next to the rusted golf clubs? If you want to buy an original Roland TR 808 today, you are not going to find one in a bargain bin. You are not going to find one in a thrift store. The machine that was laughed out of professional studios, the machine that was discontinued because nobody wanted it, is now widely considered the holy grail of audio history. Today, a pristine, working condition TR 808 will command astronomical prices on the vintage market. We are talking upwards of $5,000, $6,000, sometimes even $8,000 or more, depending on the condition. They are no longer left on damp basement floors. They are locked inside the climate-controlled vaults of wealthy collectors and elite producers. The plastic box has become an artifact. The rejected toy is now a museum piece. This journey from a commercial failure to an underground weapon, and finally to an invaluable piece of cultural history, forces us to synthesize a rather uncomfortable philosophical reflection about the nature of perfection. We live in an era right now where modern computers can flawlessly replicate any acoustic environment in the known universe. A teenager with a laptop today has access to millions of perfectly recorded, pristine drum samples. You can program a digital drum kit to hit with mathematically perfect timing, down to the millisecond. Yet, in the boardrooms of music software companies around the world, brilliant audio engineers are currently spending millions of dollars in research and development. And what are they doing with all that money and computing power? They are writing complex algorithms trying to artificially program the exact mathematical errors, the unpredictable background hiss, and the slight, drifting analog imperfections of a circuit board built from defective transistors in 1980. They are using supercomputers to try and fake the sound of broken silicon. It leaves you with a powerful realization about human nature, technology, and the art we consume. In a world that is increasingly obsessed with flawless, frictionless execution where everything is auto-tuned, digitized, and smoothed out for our convenience, the human ear eventually craves friction. Absolute perfection is, ultimately, boring. It lacks a pulse. It is the glitches, the limitations, the hardware pushed past its breaking point, and the beautiful, unintended mistakes that actually survive the test of time. The matrix of our culture does not glitch by accident. Sometimes, the system produces an anomaly so profound, so deeply resonant, that it changes the trajectory of everything that comes after it. Sometimes it glitches on purpose, and the world just takes a decade to notice. So the next time you hear a song on the radio that shakes the foundation of your car, or you feel the deep, resonant thump of a kick drum vibrating in your chest, ask yourself where that sound really came from. Because chances are, you aren't just listening to a beat. You are listening to the echo of a defective transistor, sitting in a plastic box, waiting patiently in a pawn shop window for someone brave enough to plug it in and turn it all the way up.